Hello again, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast. Today, we're going to be joined by the incredibly talented Emily Barker. Last year, Emily released her latest album, Fragile as Humans, which featured over on our Top 50 Album of the Year countdown. Emily is also about to head out on a UK tour in support of the album, so plenty of time for you to still pick up a ticket and head along. Before we talk to Emily, though, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow Full Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening. Welcome to the Full Pelt Music Podcast, Emily Barker. Absolutely delighted to have you on today. So excited to delve into everything that we've got to talk about, the album, the tour. But first things first, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'm cold. Yeah, we were just chatting about it before we hit record, but it's quite a shock to go from, I think it was actually 41 degrees the day that I left Perth and then arrived and it was 3. And it's really hit me. I feel like there's a reason why autumn exists, is to like gradually introduce you to cold weather and darkness, and so it's weird, and I've forgotten how to keep warm. But I remember actually today to put on my long johns, and yeah, so it's all coming back to me.
Good, because I've got two heaters placed strategically near me to keep me warm. But of course, I, as you say, have acclimatized through autumn into the British winter. You have obviously made the interesting decision to uproot yourself during the middle of summer in Australia to come to
Yeah,
the unpredictable British winter, and obviously, yeah, I can imagine it is rather cold.
yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I can't stop eating. That's what, like, pretty much since I've got here, I'm just like, it takes a lot of energy to try to keep warm. I need to eat. Can't stop eating. Yeah.
I'm going to use that excuse personally as well, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. But obviously, as I say, there's a lot for us to talk about. And the reason that you've made that flight over and you've come over to the UK is because you're going to be playing a number of shows over here. And before we talk about the shows themselves, I'd love to talk about the reason why you're going to be playing those shows. So, obviously, they're in support of your latest album, Fragile as Humans, which just featured on our album of the year list for 2024. Just a phenomenal album that I've really loved going back to in the lead up to this. Obviously, chance to talk to you. I've had another listen and just reminded myself of just why
Oh,
I sort of fell in love with it in the first place. And
thank
um,
you.
the question that I want to lead with really is along those lines. So obviously you put it out in May last year. So we're talking what 7, 8 months ago now you put the album out. With that period of time gone, what does the album mean to you at the moment?
Mm. Well, I love this quote by Nick Cave, which is that songs gather meaning. And I do feel like, the song stays the same, but your life continually evolves. And even though it might have been written during a particular time in your life, it's quite amazing how that thing stays the same and you perform it. And but it makes new meaning. It makes new meaning as life changes for you and around you. And so a lot of the songs have yeah, they keep on showing new sides to themselves as whenever I perform them. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a lovely quote from Nick Cave. That, and
Mm.
I mean, I agree. Songs for me are like living entities because they
Yeah.
will evolve for you as the artist that wrote them, but also obviously for us on the other side of it. What you
Yeah.
wrote a song about. We
Mm.
might hear that song and apply those lyrics and that song to something within our lives. And that's the beauty of music, which I don't think you get necessarily in all other art forms. And yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, certainly hadn't heard that quote before from Dick,
No,
but it's
it's great.
fantastic.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
also So, because I've been doing a lot of solo shows, and then the last 2 days I've been rehearsing with my band, which, brings a whole new life to the songs as well. And, we're choosing which parts of the record to reflect in our playing, but we're just a three-piece, so there's lots that we can't cover. And that also, brings out certain parts of the songs, or yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting how they evolve all the time, from recording them initially to then the live performance.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, really fascinating. And obviously, first plug of many that will come in this podcast for listeners is obviously if you want to hear how those songs are going to sound as a free piece, as Emily says, on the tour, then you're going to need to buy yourselves a ticket. And there
Mhm.
will be a link in the bio for listeners to go and do that. And I strongly encourage them to. I've caught you live a number of times over the years, either supporting Frank Turner or
Mm.
at Glastonbury, or I think a few other festivals as well that I've probably
Oh,
caught you
good.
at, and always had a great time. So definitely, listeners, as I say, I will plug throughout, and that is the first one to go and do that. And with obviously the album still and staying on Fragile as Humans. Obviously, 6 months or plus down the line, obviously, both of us have sort of reflected on it as we've just talked about. But I'd also like to get your thoughts on how you think the album resonated with your audience. Now, obviously, again,
Mm.
sort of further down the line, and you have the benefit of hindsight. How do you think the album um, was received? What was the reaction like from your perspective?
It was so heartwarming, actually. I had a lot of people, because I think I released 6 or 7 singles, and there was about 6 weeks or so in between each one, and I did quite a lot of writing about the songs, where they'd come from, like looking at what informed them, and speaking to some of the issues that we collectively experience. And I had a lot of people write really personal emails, responding to my newsletter or on social media, just relating to the songs and what they were about. And so it feels to me that they have really struck a chord with listeners. And yeah, a lot of the album, it's a very introspective album in a lot of ways. And I wrote a lot of the songs during lockdown, the second year of that. Um, but at the same time as being very personal, coming from this introspective inner world, I feel like it seems like so many of us were going through these similar motions, and that it speaks to this collective experience in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, so it's been a beautiful thing, and I often find at gigs as well, people come up and have a chat, and it seems people unafraid to be vulnerable with me in return for being vulnerable um with my songwriting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's part of what is going to resonate with people so much is obviously, I mean, to pun on the title, we are all fragile as humans,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's one of the few things we all have in common is we all have
yeah,
that sort of feeling of fragility in life. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's yeah, lovely that it's had such a reaction, and damn right I would say as well because it is just a fantastic record, and
Oh, thank you.
so delving into the making of that record,
Mm.
um, obviously you've made a few albums over the years, and obviously would have had different experiences with each. I was taken when I noticed you worked with Luke Potashnik on the
Oh,
album because Luke's someone I'm familiar with from his work with the temperance movement actually, but
oh,
it's
cool.
been with obviously a number of acts and obviously worked in the recording studio with a number of acts. So how was that process for you this time? And obviously getting to work with Luke, what was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, I was introduced to Luke through Dom Monks, who's a wonderful producer engineer himself. And and I met Luke. I emailed him and said, "Hey, Dom has recommended you. I'm looking for a producer to make my next record. Would you be interested in hearing a few songs?" And he wrote back very enthusiastically and said he'd love to love to hear them. So we had a bit of back and forth. He really enjoyed the handful of songs that I wrote, and then we arranged to meet up. I went to his studio, which is in Beckington in Frome, and just literally as soon as I met him and he came, he just had this big beaming smile and came up and just such a lovely person to start with. But there was just he had an energy that was really he's just a positive person, but he's got a lot of depth and he's yeah, very talented. But just from the get-go, I felt very safe with him. And there was quite an immediate trust as well. And we talked through the handful of songs that I'd sent him, and he shared his ideas on how he could hear them being produced. And it absolutely resonated with what I had going on in my head. And he also really picked up on a few things that I suppose, really challenged myself or focused on during my songwriting as well. Certain like the harmony with the song, so things like modulation and the chord relationships and things like this that I had put quite a lot of effort into, I suppose, into trying to push myself and my music knowledge. And yeah, and then lyrics, and yeah, he just really seemed to get what the songs were, what I was trying to do, and just had this really inspired vision. So I came away with a really good feeling about working with him, and yeah, it's exactly it just went so beautifully, our recording time, and we took our time. We did quite a lot of uh pre-production, which is not something I've spent a lot of time doing before, but um he sort of went through each song with a fine tooth comb, um and it was always like a lyric that I felt like, oh yeah, that's I think that's good enough. And he would go, what do you think about this one? And I thought, ah, damn, I thought I got away with that. But and there were just like a few songs with a few little moments that and he never said like, I think it should be this. It was more that I reckon you could dig a bit deeper and make this even stronger. And he was right every single time. And it just meant that the songs came out way better than where they'd started. And we looked at things like structure as well, of course, and tweaked a few things, and they're all pretty minor, but they just meant that they're as good as and as strong as they could possibly be, I felt. So he was a wonderful editor, and I haven't really had that in the same way, but because of his temperance movement background as a songwriter and a musician, I've again felt like I could really trust him, and everything he said just chimed with something that I also questioned or felt. Yeah.
Oh, that is wonderful. I'm always like fascinated to get that insight into how that process went down, and obviously yeah, really ecstatic that yeah, two musicians that I've got a lot of respect for obviously hit it off so well, and probably explains to me why perhaps this album was struck such a chord with me, because it is yeah, a fantastic album, and yeah, absolutely yeah, d delighted to be able to yeah, hone in on it. And there's a couple more bits I want to focus in as well
Yeah.
on the album. And the first one I'm going to come to now is actually the artwork to the album, which I don't
Oh,
find
cool.
myself talking about too much. It's not the first time I've talked about it on the podcast, but 60 plus episodes of this podcast in this yeah, been a while, but the
Yeah.
artwork from release, I was taken aback by the artwork. I think it just worked like really well visually, and sort of
Yeah.
yeah, obviously it can pull you in. Artwork, it's funny how we talked about different art forms earlier, but within music, obviously there's various art forms that fall within what you have to do to present your music and put it out there in the world. And
Mm.
yeah, artwork is yeah, not something I've ever really paid too much attention to, which is probably credit to the artwork for this album, because actually for
Mm.
me to go, oh, this is really, I just really like the look of this,
Oh,
is saying
amazing.
something. So just how did obviously you go about commissioning that piece of work, and what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on it?
Oh, I love that you picked up on that because um actually, for the first time, I had some budget to work with a creative team, and they're based in Newcastle, New South Wales. Um, and it's a team called Head Jam, and I went there and I sat at this big table with photographers, videographers, graphic designers, and then more members of the team. And they had listened to the album, and they we had a 4 hour long meeting where they asked me so many questions about photography I loved, films I loved, like interior design, other musicians that I love, or album campaigns that I'd seen with great artwork. So much. It was amazing. And then they basically put together this whole visual package for one film, which I got them to do the film for Wild to be sharing this moment, but then for all the digital singles, for the pack shots, and then for the vinyl record artwork, and for the CDs, and for the promo shots, everything, like all the visual aspects of an album campaign. And I've never done that before, and it's always, even though I'm a real fan of art and photography and films, it often falls on the artist to try to suddenly be all these things, which we may or may not be. And for me, it's something that I've had to do. But to be honest, being part of this collaborative experience and being able to hand over those jobs to people who really know what they're doing, and that's what they've studied and worked as professionally, was just the best thing to hand it over. And I still remember the presentation that they gave me of the visual aesthetics for each of these components. Um, I was pretty much in tears just looking at it. I thought I was so moved by it, and I really felt like they had listened um so deeply to everything that I'd said, and gone and done their research, and just sort of, it was like they'd gone inside my brain and had a look around in with all the images that are there that I love, and then created this beautiful original um artwork for all of the campaign. And it really reflected what the songs were all about as well. It felt really personal and intimate, but yet um yeah, others like, and really honest and raw and things like this. And they really got it. And so it actually gave me more confidence, I would say, in presenting the songs and in talking about the album. And because I had all this visual reinforcement. So it was a real privilege to be able to work with them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely a privilege to have that sense, as you say, of the added confidence in what you're going to be presenting. Because I mean, that you got me thinking that it is a valid point. Obviously, as a musician, you obviously create, these songs, this album, and you know that you need to have a package around that to be able to
Mm,
present it to the world. And as you say, there are a lot of artistic people out there that can do a bit of everything. And
mm,
I don't certainly don't think you've struggled in the past, but with this presentation, as you say, like actually having that there behind you made you,
mm.
gave you that and yeah, that's a really interesting concept to me. Actually, that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it was so enjoyable too, just to have a team to collaborate with. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I mean, I say I don't pay much attention to the artwork. Obviously, I pay more than probably the average person. But the one thing I do pay a lot of attention to is music videos,
Mm.
because I grew up watching music videos and I've always just had a liking for them. So we have something called Full Pelt TV, and we always put the spotlight on a video of an artist that we're playing or interviewing rather on the podcast. So the
Yeah.
video that I want to put on the next Full Pelt TV is the Quiet Ways, and
Oh, yeah.
obviously again just some stunning visuals that go into that video. Was
Mm.
that all part of that same package from the same group, or yeah?
And so
How did the
that one was
concepts come up?
actually separate. That came a little bit later, and my manager actually, because there quite get quite a few emails or messages from people who are at the beginning of their journey of being an animator or a video maker, which is so lovely, like to
Yeah,
receive. Um And so that was somebody who'd got in touch with my manager actually and just said, oh, I'm a fan of Emily's music and I'd I'd love the opportunity to do an animation and can, offer a generous price and his work was so fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And then I was yeah, again, I felt like he really listened to the lyrics, listened to the mood of the song and just yeah, represented those, yeah, the lyrics so beautifully through his visuals. Yeah. So thank you for featuring that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He has smashed it, as I would say, with
Mm,
those visuals. So again,
yeah.
the plugs that I like to put in, listeners, there'll be a link to that video as well in the bio of this episode. So go through and obviously have a watch of it for yourselves. And to close out the discussion on Fragile as Humans, I'm going to go back to the start of Fragile as Humans and the opening track with Small We Start, which is one of my favourites on the album. It is obviously such a
Oh.
beautiful song. What can you tell me about the story behind the song? Because again, another plug would be
Mm.
listeners definitely, as Emily touched on earlier. If you go on Emily's website, you can see some descriptions that you've put on there around some of the songs, and it
Yeah.
did certainly piqued my interest reading that because it was kind of a beautiful kind of concept behind it. So yeah, what is the
Oh, thanks.
story behind the song?
Yeah, well, I did this quite a bit, I realize, on this album, and for the first time where each verse is sort of for somebody else or about somebody else. And verse one on that is for my dad. And um he we grew up in a really small little town and he still lives there and his life is quite small but humble and beautiful um and so he loves gardening and he loves a glass of red wine in the evening and to read a crime thriller. And anyway, this what how does it? I've never seen the Northern Lights glow from a wooden hut in Abisko. There's a National Geographic photo that's been ripped out of a magazine, and I can't actually remember now if this is real or not. But I remember seeing a National Geographic a page ripped out, and it was of the Northern Lights, and I sort of had this feeling like he's not traveled internationally that lot, very much, and how we come to peace with what we can't achieve or see or do, but there's so much to be enjoyed in our near vicinity and in the smallness and in the humbleness of um say being in a small town or something like this. So it's sort of like that scope of Northern Stars is big and cinematic but there's also these small day-to-day beauties that we can find and my dad very much represents somebody who is satisfied with those um and I kind of think that they're the important things and they're also the things that we need more than ever right now because there's so much that feels beyond our control and grasp and influence in any way, but where we can have positive influences in our immediate community and vicinity. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's sort of what the song is about in general.
Yeah, really powerful message, and
Mm.
yeah, really resonated with me. So yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing all of that about the album. Obviously, again, listeners, really, if you haven't, I mean, if you're listening to Emily on our podcast, I'm guessing you probably listened to the album already. But if you haven't, listeners, definitely go away and do
Yeah.
that. And obviously, we're going to talk about the tour and what to expect, but. Leading into this tour, obviously, last year you did get to play some album release shows, which are always great. The
Mm.
album comes out and you get to go out and instantly play these songs in different kind of settings for fans.
Yeah.
Question for me: when you did so, did the songs sort of adapt to the stage the way you expected them to?
Well, that's a good question. I think because I perform solo or a duo or with a trio, sometimes with a four piece, um, the songs always evolve, I suppose. And what surprised me though was doing solo gigs that I could still do some of the songs. So, Feathered Thing is that one of the bigger songs sonically, and then also sad songs, I would say as well. It's like, how am I gonna do this? And I just sort of try a lot of the time, like sad songs, I remember I hadn't even rehearsed it solo, but I just felt like giving it a go in the moment. It was such a loving crowd. And I thought, I'm just gonna try it and see what happens. And it actually went really, really well. Um, yeah, so it's always sort of surprising when you can do the biggest song on the album solo and it works, and it's a good surprise. But having said that, I'm really excited to now have the trio that I'll have on this tour and to be able to get some of that the bigness going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads me into sort of the big question really on the tour. So listeners, again, there will be a link in the bio, and I do encourage you, obviously, if we haven't whetted your appetite enough, hopefully this question might, to go and pick up a ticket and go and support Emily for one, and obviously some great independent venues you're playing at as well. So go and support these
Yeah.
venues because they desperately need our help. So Emily, I guess I'm going to throw the salesman pitch from me over to you now. And what should people attending the shows, what should they expect?
Well, there'll definitely be a focus on the new album, including performing a couple of the songs that I've never done live yet. So we've just been rehearsing them up. But yeah, it's gonna be a trio. So Rob Pemberton on drums. He also has a wonderful voice, so he'll be doing quite a lot of backing vocals. He plays synths as well, and we'll be triggering an SPD, like a sampler thing. So we'll have some of the album sounds, but we want to balance it to still make sure it feels real. So it's not just like a backing track sort of thing. And then Alex Heen is on double bass and electric bass, and he also is got a great voice. So he's doing quite a lot of harmony. So there's harmony would be a big part of it, vocal harmony. And just quite a lot of atmosphere as well that we're managing to create with some drones and things like that. So, which the album has a lot of. But then trying to do outside of the album songs, trying to do the ones that feel like the faves, but are still like our faves too.
Yeah, always important that part, definitely,
Yeah,
because yeah,
definitely.
you've got to enjoy what you're playing. Because for me, I mean, maybe some people don't. Maybe again, I'm obviously a massive music fan, hence I do
Yeah,
this, and I can pick up on when an artist doesn't really want to be playing a song, and actually, I'd
yeah,
rather they play something that means something
no,
to them. So,
totally. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, again, listeners definitely head along. I'll be heading along. It's going to be a great opportunity to hear these songs live. I always like to give out the social handles as well as we head towards the end of the podcast. Again, in 2025, I'd imagine listeners are savvy enough to find you on social media without me, but it's become a bit of a tradition, and they will pop up. And you might make my life really easy, Emily, because it is Emily Barker Halo across all of the social platforms.
yeah.
So sometimes I have to read out like three or four different ones with underscores and all kinds of stuff in there, and it
Oh
gets a bit
yeah.
monotonous. But yeah, Emily Barker Halo. So listeners, definitely give Emily a follow to stay up to date with everything coming from Emily in the future. The last question for the podcast that we have is just a standard one we always ask, and it follows the live conversation. And it's simply around, obviously, as I say, independent venues, smaller venues desperately need a lot of help. So I just ask all of the guests to give a shout out to a venue. Pick one of your favourite venues. I know it might be hard because there's probably quite a lot, but if you could give a shout out to a music venue that people you think should try
Yeah.
and go to, which one would it be?
Well, the one that comes to mind immediately, like you said, it's a hard question because I love so many, but I'm really looking forward to the Brudenell Social Club in Leeds. I played it just recently on the King Creosote tour that I did, and like there's just a great like bar pub area there where you can play pool and get a pie and drink a really nice pint. They keep their lines are like really clean and just such good ale and the venue itself is just brilliant. It's so great. You can sit or stand and the stage is nice and high and there's a tiny backstage, mind you. But there's the people who run it are just they've got a few venues now around town, Nate, and they're really strongly just believe in the, importance of live music and make it happen all over Leeds. And so I'm really looking forward to that one. Yeah. So shout out to the Brudenell.
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
Mm.
fantastic venue. I've only managed to get there the once, but I'd love to go. It's one of those that I see on tour itineraries, and I'm always like, yes, you pick out ones you can see regularly get sort of good gigs. And I managed to get
Yeah.
there to see Frank Turner, actually, I think it was probably about
Cool.
5 or 6 years ago. And yeah,
Yeah.
had a great time. So definitely, yeah, again, listeners, if you're near Leeds, that's the one, that's the date to pick and to go to. So
Yeah.
my final message, as always, is another plug. Listeners, obviously, listen to the album if you haven't already. Check out the video and everything we talked about. And obviously, please do head along to the show. But I always give the final message to the guests. So, Emily, what would be your final message for the listeners today?
Uh, Stay warm. It's bloody cold here. No. What's a nice thing to say? Oh, too many things. I can tell you what I'm keeping in mind in 2025 for me. It's a friend of mine mentioned it to me recently. I was like, oh, that's so good. But it's to live your purpose, detach from the outcome. So that I'll
Yeah,
pass that on to you guys as well.
absolutely. That's the second fantastic quote you've given us today. So,
It's a really good one. It's a Buddhist saying of some sort. I was like, oh, that is so good. Yeah.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. And this podcast has been so good as well. So thank you so much, Emily, for coming on to
Yeah,
the
thank
podcast and
you,
doing
Paul.
this. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Emily. Do see if you can pick up a ticket for her UK shows. Of course, follow Emily as well on social media. And while you're there, if you would, please do follow Full Pelt on social media. We are on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. Finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast.